Okay, one of the critical parts of your automated irrigation system is your manifold and your connections between your tap outlet, where we measured the flow and pressure at the very start of the video series, and to connect into your manifold and then out to all the 4 zones. So this is a collection of componentry which looks a little bit overwhelming, but I'm going to work my way through it. It's not as overwhelming as you might think, but getting all the right components and the right type of gear for the particular job is very important, and certainly we can help you that at our yard if you need all that. But this is basically some of the equipment that you're going to need to connect from your tap outlet down to your manifold unit, then out to your zones. And we'll work our way through from the tap down through the whole process to try and simplify that. Okay, something to keep in mind when you're doing the connections from your tap, your outlet of where you normally connect your hose to, through to the inlet of your solenoid valves or your manifold, that is the highest pressure point. So when your system's all closed up, your valves are shut, that will be at the full pressure of the outlet from your tap. And what's important there is you want all your joints to either have O-rings or good seals, or to be glued joints, so it's nice and tight and firm, to protect it from that higher pressure. From the outlet side of the valves through to the heads in your garden and your lawn, the pressure will be lower, because when the valve's shut, your heads slowly drop down, your sprays start to slowly reduce in flow, and that drops the pressure naturally. So the pressure in that part of your system is not as high as what it is between the tap and the manifold. So that's the area where you want to get your joints really tight and well sealed with either glued joints, O-rings, or some sealant. And we'll go through that and work our way from the tap outlet down to the inlet of your solenoid valves, and just work our way through what you need to do for that particular part of the project. Okay, great, it's starting to rain, which is always the case when you're talking about irrigation systems, but the rain's going to be here for a short period of time. But the first thing we're going to get into is the connection to your tap. Now, most taps will be around about a 20 millimeter outlet with your standard sort of screwed fitting. And this is what goes into the top of this. Now, the reason I've chosen this particular wide joint with some closing ball valves on it is it allows me to put my normal hose connection on, because I still want to use the hose from that tap. If I just connected it to the manifold, I would lose the use of that particular tap outlet for a normal hosing, because you will still want to use your hose for a whole lot of things. So you want to start with a joint like that. Now, this is a 20 millimeter connection. It's got an O-ring in it, and I'll just show you what I mean by an O-ring if it comes out. It's a piece of rubber ring. Now, all the way through this, well, we would want to have those O-rings through all our joints. If you don't, we'd look to use sealant. So for example, around here, I might well use some sealant just to give it a lot tighter seal, so that we protect it from that higher pressure. So that's the first thing. I like to use one of these. It's also got isolating valves, so I can shut off the system to either the hose, or I can shut it off to the solenoids and the automated irrigation system if I should have to do anything separately with them. So that's the first part of the process. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to connect from here, which is a 20 millimeter outlet, to our system with all our solenoids and all the manifold. That happens to be a 25 millimeter. So this is always a tricky part of these jobs, is getting the right fittings to go from different sizes of joints. Now, this is 20 millimeter. I will put some sealant around that, but just for now, for demonstration, that allows me to do a 20 millimeter connection to the 25 millimeter outlet, which is one of these, which again, I'll put some sealant on that because there's no O-rings on these, but I'll do that in a minute just for the purposes of now. So now I've got a good grip there, and I can start connecting up some pipe into here, and I'll cut this to the right lengths. But this is 25 millimeter pipe. I'll cut it to the right lengths. And the other thing I'll do with all these joints wherever possible is glue them up, because there's nothing tighter and better than the glued joint in your high pressure part of your system. But for all these other joints, if there's no O-ring, I will use some thread tape, which is this, which you can get from all hardware shops that we can supply you with. But we'll roll the thread tape on all those joints to make sure they're nice and strong and well sealed for the high pressure parts of our system. Okay, something else I do like to put into these systems is a filter. Now, your water should be reasonably clean, but what you don't want is any rubbish from the whole system getting down into your valves and out into your heads. So it doesn't hurt to put one of these in a filter. Again, you use your 25 mil connections, which will connect to your pipes. Always being careful the direction of all these devices. In this case, it'll be this direction. Just so you can see, you take this off and it's got a filter inside it that allows you to catch any rubbish that might come into your system to make sure it doesn't make its way into your head. So it's a nice little addition to have to do that added protection for any rubbish getting into your system and keeping it all nice and clean. And again, there's no O-rings in these, so I will put thread tape around those before I screw them up permanently, but that's your filter. Okay, the next critical part of the system is your manifold connections. Now this is what we use because I've got 4 zones. You can get these in 2, 6 and larger, but because I've got 4 zones, I'm using a 4-zone manifold connection. Now the good thing about these particular manifolds, they're very robust, very strong. They have O-rings, like I showed you. I won't pull those out, but there's a little rubber seal inside each of these, which means they seal nice and tight. And they've got these screwed fittings too, so I can screw up everything nice and tight and gives me the flexibility. So that's the next thing you need in the process, where we can connect up. Okay, I'm just putting the fittings into either inlet and the outlet side of my solenoid valve. So I just sort of go through a couple of things. I put some thread tape on that. That's the fitting for the outlet side of the valve. Now if you look at your arrow, that's very important. Don't get it in the wrong direction. The arrow is pointing in this direction, so that's the outlet side. I put the thread tape because there's no O-ring on that and no O-ring on that. And then I've got the 19mm lateral pipe connection on this side. I'll tighten that up with a spanner just to make sure it's tight, but that'll do for now. On the other side, which connects to your manifold, is what we call a nipple. Now this has got an O-ring on it. You'll notice the black ring, it should fit nice and snugly in there. I just took it out so I could show you. So that's got an O-ring. So I don't need to put any thread tape on the side with the O-ring. So I can put that in here. So on this side, so just check each side, because the other side of this doesn't have an O-ring, but this side does, and I want the O-ring up against here. So just check those, what it's got O-rings, what doesn't, what needs thread tape, what doesn't. And I'll just put a spanner on that and tighten that up with. But that's then the connections. That goes into our manifold, and that goes into your 19mm lateral pipe out towards your zones. Okay, very important part of the process is your solenoid valve. These are the 2 leads that will connect to the controller, which we'll go through a little later, into the solenoid itself, which is the energy part of it, which operates a little plunger inside here, which opens and closes the valve. When it's under pressure, it'll open and close all through the electrics from your controller. So this is a very critical part of the system. A few things to keep in mind. There's a direction arrow. You may not be able to see it there on the top, so you need to get that in the right direction of flow. The other thing too, these don't have O-rings on them, but you can see that there. So I can then screw that into here to give me my 4 solenoid valve for my 4 zones, and then I can get the inlet coming from my tap into here. So that's the next critical part of it. And then from the outlet side, this is where I connect into my normal, that's the 19mm pipe that I've got all running around the yard. So the 19mm pipe fits into that, and then these screw into this end. And again, there's no O-ring on that and no O-ring on that. Even though it's on the low pressure side of the valve, I'll probably whack some thread tape on that just to be sure. And then I've got a nice tight system. So they're the key components that you need to consider before you start doing your manifold setup. And obviously it makes it a lot easier when you've got all the gear ready to go and you've pre-thought about it, because it's quite a pain when you get halfway through it and you're, oh, I'm missing that one little bit. So it's worth thinking about all the joints through the system. We can certainly help you with all that, but that's the most critical part of your system, is getting a nice high pressure, good joints into your manifold, a good solid manifold with O-rings in it, your solenoid valves out to your 19mm pipe. Okay, as I mentioned, some of the joints won't have any O-rings in them. This is a standard joint fitting onto my filter inlet and my filter outlet. What I'm going to do is add some thread tape to this joint just to give it a much tighter seal, because there's no O-rings in here. Now just a little trick to keep in mind with thread tape is you want to screw it on in the correct direction, so when you screw on your fitting it doesn't peel the thread tape off. So in this case you're screwing up and it's going in a clockwise direction as such. So you don't want to put it on such that it peels it off. So when you're winding on your thread tape, you want to put it in the direction, so in a clockwise direction like so. A reasonable coverage there. So it's actually going in the same direction. So when I screw that on like so, I can get a nice tight fitting, and it's actually not peeling off the thread tape at the same time. So that's just one joint there. So that's just something to keep in mind, just a little trick to keep in mind with your thread tape, to make sure you're putting it on in the clockwise direction before you put your Okay, I've got the 4 valves, the manifold in place. It looks a bit grubby around here, but I'll clean that up and put a cover on it. Just something else that I like to do around the valves. It's a bit of a conservative approach, but I do like to put pipe clamps around the valve. If they don't have O-rings, I tend to use the pipe clamps. They're just a little bit tighter, just to be sure around the valves where there's a little bit more movement and a bit more pressure. They should be okay on this side without them, but I just do it just for the sake of a couple of bucks. Just so around the manifold area is nice and strong and solid.
If this video was helpful, you can get a lot more information on our website, completelandscapes.co.nz, or check out other videos on our YouTube channel.